All right. And we're recording. Welcome to the Pownell Planning Board meeting of February 18th, 2026. I'm the co-chair, Orion Breen. With us is fellow planning board members Brian and Mercedes and our CEO. And you want to introduce Brad? Sorry. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Somebody have the agenda brought up on their screen. We say we have a discussion of minutes to approve. Does anybody have any comments, questions, concerns about the minutes? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Looks like unanimous approval. See a number of folks in the audience today. Are there people here have specific things they want to comment on? Or are you people have places they need to go that they need to make a comment at the start of the meeting, or can you wait for a comment later on in the meeting? Sounds like people are okay with waiting. Shall we go over old business? We have ordinance changes we're working on. Will our CEO take the lead and walk us through what some of these ordinance changes are, which we've already looked at and discussed in the workshop, as well as some additional info.
I'm going to request that we reverse old business and new business so we don't keep everybody waiting that's in the audience for the new business.
Is that acceptable with the board members?
Yep.
All right, we'll do new business. We have Future Facilities Committee, Fire Station, Public Works Sketch Plan. Come on up.
My name is Kyler Fiegels. I think most of you know me. I'm with the Future Facilities Committee, and I want to introduce you or reintroduce you to the project. And I'd like to come around here.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of you have been following what we're doing. But we, as you know, from the last Future Facilities Committee, they did walk away with a floor plan that we found largely acceptable, a concept of a site plan, and with and a cost estimate. And with that, this committee has been moving forward. As you know, grant money is a very important part of this. And in fact, we've hired Isabel to help us research that. And interestingly, to me, in any event, applying for the grant money is kind of what dictates the process. Normally, as you know, you have a design, you come before the planning board with a more or less complete package. And then we take it from there. We're not doing that. We are coming to you, the way it works out in applying for the grant money, it is in our best interest to have a site plan designed and approved. And we're not here for that tonight. I just want to kind of walk you through the process because we are now actively working on the site plan. So that's, it, I mean, it's really a short story, but the thing is that it is out of sequence as an architect, I find that a little difficult, to wrap my head around. And that's what we're going to be asking you to do at some point. Now, as I say, we've hired a site planning firm, BH2M. Andy Morel is here from BH2M, and he's going to walk you through what we've done or what they have done so far. So should I just stay here or should I just go back and?
You can stay here for
All right.
if you want.
Well,
Evening, Andy Morrell from BH2M, civil engineer. So this is a 4.24 acre lot. I've got a plan of it up over here. There's also on your overhead there. Zoned village. We have done existing conditions, boundary survey on the parcel, trying to figure out what this parcel contains. There are two streams on the parcel, if I may. One that runs on this portion of the site here, and one that runs along this portion of the site. The dashed lines you see on the plan are wetlands. Those were delineated by Flycatcher. What we are proposing is just under a 16,000 square foot building. We have oriented the building in a way to maximize the solar ability on the roof. Access from both sides of the building. This entrance here is a 24-foot wide entrance, the main entrance to the facility, if you will. Two-way traffic, public parking in the front, additional parking here and here, and full, like I said, full access to the building. There'll be garage doors and bays that are down here. Exit bays over here as well. This entrance is more of a public works, fire and rescue entrance and exit. We've had conversations about potentially connecting that parking lot to that entrance road. I think that probably makes sense. If we do that, we're probably going to try to restrict the general public from using that entrance or using that exit on the other side. But those are some details we can get into as we work through the design. In front of the building, I'm currently showing 23 parking spaces and then 13 other spaces over on the southern side of the building. To give you some perspective, the two entrances are about 160 feet apart on Hollowell Road. We've looked at a bunch of different layouts on this parcel. There's some wetlands and some streams that make this, I won't say difficult, but there are some options on this site to where we can lay this building. You probably saw some iterations where the building was a little bit further back. We moved it closer to the road, if you will. There are a lot of advantages to that. Moving it away from the big wetland here. This section here, the relatively large wetland. So the further we move this way, the less impact we have to that. But the more impact we have to the two streams on either side. So we're trying to walk that line between what layout works with what the town is looking for, what layout is protecting the environment to the greatest extent possible, something that we can get permitted with the state. I think we've done that with this layout, but we are here tonight to just simply introduce the project, get some input from you guys that you can give to us and we can use throughout the design process to help us move this project forward.
I should add that we're going to go through the entire permit process and we'll be doing that before we come to you. So, we will have a complete sign off on this from the state and all other, wetlands impact, that sort of thing.
So the full DEP review.
Yes, it will.
Yeah, so this.
75-foot stream setback with a lot of that parking lot.
Yeah, so this project is going to need multiple permits from the state. It's going to need a or impacts within 75 feet of the stream. It's going to need a NERPA permit for the wetland impacts. We're in the process of setting up an initial meeting with the DEP to have some initial discussions with them about this layout and see what their thoughts are on this layout. We're pretty confident this layout could be permitted, but that's to be determined.
Just for context, this is right there, right?
Yeah.
That's what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. I should have mentioned that. Yep.
Is there any particular waivers that you foresee coming to the planning board for already in your mind, or is that all TBA?
I don't believe so.
Can you be more specific, what kind of waiver?
Well, I'll take that as a no. So that's just, sometimes there's projects and people look at the ordinances and they're aware that there's something in the ordinance that they don't feel applies to this project or they'll need a waiver for.
Well, I don't want to waive my right to that.
Yeah, I'm not saying you won't come back to the waiver. I was just asking if there's anything
We're-
that stood out in the
We're
process.
certainly very early in the process. I've looked through the ordinance to see if there was anything. There was nothing that jumped out at me that I didn't think that we could meet as part of
Yeah.
this design. So I don't anticipate any, but
Yeah,
you never know how that goes when you get into the design.
not uncommon. I just
Yep.
was pointing out there. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
The DEP feels it's acceptable, and we have planning consultants we consult with as well, but we try to listen to the experts in general when it comes to most projects.
May I ask, is there a date you are kind of up against with your grant in terms of the timeline of this portion, not the full portion?
That's a very good question, and the answer is it's complicated.
Okay.
And, Isabel can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that, the big money we're going for is through appropriations in the Senate. And that is Susan Collins. And apparently the applications for this year have been sent out by now in normal times. We are not living in normal times. The applications have not been sent out yet, which means that there is a possibility, and I can only call it that, nothing more, that we can slip in under the wire here if we keep moving this project forward. Which would be a wonderful thing. We wouldn't lose a year. And then,
Then time is of the essence. And so are you showing us this month and then hoping next month we sign off on this? But what is your ask of us?
well,
this month?
I've got to defer to BH2M regarding how long that takes.
Okay.
And they're dead in the water
Okay.
right now, for other reasons. So we've got to get some permit money
Got it.
and haven't been given it yet. But, I want to free them up to work as quickly as possible. And they know what our goal is. And, I don't want to push them too hard.
To give you some perspective, I would envision if we said tomorrow, let's move forward with this project, I would say we'd probably need a couple months
Okay.
to put the full design together, have an application together that we could come before you guys with a full site plan submission. But we would certainly like to move that forward just as quickly as possible.
DEP could add months to that, right? I mean, all this stuff.
Yes, the DEP review is the big hurdle that could potentially really add to the timeline of this project. I mean, right now, we've got about 60,000 square feet of impervious area, so we're looking at a stormwater permit with the DEP, which typically has 120 days for them to approve it. Very seldomly do they approve it in 120 days under the current situation we're under. You're probably looking quite a bit more than that.
Well, okay, so how long is the entire permit process? From the time you're ready to permit it, how long will it be? Because there's no point in coming back here until we have all appropriate permits.
I was going to ask, do you need the permits to also apply for your grant? So how do those?
That's correct.
Oh, okay. Ooh.
Does this board typically act on projects prior to a DEP approval, or does this board typically wait for a DEP approval before they grant any kind of, an approval on a project?
I don't think a DEP approval is typical to this board.
I mean,
So that's hard to say.
with projects, I think it is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, I think it is possible to approve certain aspects of it to say, pending upon, pending upon
Right.
Yeah,
approval of yada, 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 that's,
That's-
or, and then when you get that, it would potentially come back to us to verify, yes, that
Yeah,
you got the appropriate.
That's how most municipalities handle it. They give you a conditional approval based on, you need to get a DEP permit. You get the DEP permit, you give it to the town. They authorize, yep, you got your permit, you move forward. In the ideal world, the permitting with the town and the DEP would be running concurrently, because inevitably the DEP is asking for changes and the town is asking for changes. So in
yeah.
an ideal world, you're doing both of them at the same time. So that would be the most efficient approach, is to work through
Okay.
the permitting with the state and the permitting with the town at the same time.
And
The ideal timeline is make a submission to the town, get some initial feedback on the full site plan package, then submit to the E DEP.
by which point you will have a far better idea of what you're presenting to the DEP. So that, can serve
Correct.
as a viable.
Correct. So the reason that's the ideal scenario is we submit to the DEP, it sits in a pile on someone's desk for 4 months before they pick it up and look at it. So we want that design to be a little bit further along. We want to be at the point where we're comfortable that the road location isn't going to change, the building location isn't going to change. There isn't some kind of major change that's going to happen. Yes, there's probably going to be some small changes, but not significant changes to the layout.
All right.
Has anybody talked to our legislators flagging this as something that's important and that, they could put in a good word to DEP to try to get it at the top of the pile?
That would be that would be a good strategy.
Are you keeping the salt shed over here or is
That's completely unrelated at this point.
so that would stay here versus trying to put?
Yeah, I couldn't even speak to that. All I know, probably the reason you're asking that is because the salt shed had at one time been a part of the duties of this committee. We have been relieved of all duties regarding the salt shed, and so we're not, as a committee, we're not following it.
Are you also asking for the location of those two streams and all the wetlands, though? Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's the old,
EP and.
yeah.
It's complicated.
Yeah, it's a separate,
That's a good thing, then.
as far as I'm concerned,
Good thing on this parcel.
got my hands full.
But I think the town sees this as a priority, and as priority to the select board, I would think it would be a priority of the planning board to try and work with the process so that DEP or whoever gets information in a timely manner. And I think the general intent is wanting to work with you guys and move this forward in a way that is both thorough review and timely, knock on wood, review of materials that are sent to us. So I appreciate you just filling us in on where things are at, and definitely keep us informed as the process continues. If
Yeah.
there's a delay somewhere and it helps us to look at something to expedite it, we will see what we can do given our schedule to try to accommodate that.
Great.
Great.
Can I just ask, does our town CEO have any red flags that you have seen in this so far in terms of just moving the site plan forward?
No, I think the wetlands is gonna be the challenge on this
Okay.
project. I'm looking at it and thinking that's quite a bit of area that's covered. What is the percentage of covered to the lot? We know that.
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can get that information and let you guys know when I come back.
Wording in the ordinance is. What does it say? 20%.
So we got like 4.2 acres on the parcel. And the building, let me just do some quick math here. Sorry, I can't do this in my head. I'm gonna double the size of the building. If I double the size of are you talking building coverage or are you talking building and parking?
And park, just to be sure. It's, it's probably building, but I just want to make sure.
So the building is about 8.5% of the parcel coverage as we've got it right now with my quick math. The parking lot is maybe, say, 2.5 times the size of the building, you're looking at 22%, something like that. But I agree, the wetlands are gonna be the challenge with this.
Site distance and everything like that has already been checked.
Yep. Yep.
All right, I don't have any further questions. Anybody else?
Great.
Appreciate you coming.
Appreciate you guys,
Thank you for your time. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
thank you.
Is there any other, as you're getting information, could you send it along to me so I can pass it on?
Yeah, we'd be happy to.
Just make that a little bit faster too.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'd be happy to.
And just for our calendar, are you thinking then we'll see you again next month or the month after to get this over? Okay. 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 Super.
I mean, we would certainly try to, I mean, if we get to the point where maybe we don't have a complete application, but we got a more refined design, maybe we come before you guys, but we'll have to kind of see how that all plays out. There's a lot of moving parts on this one, so
Mhm.
thank you.
For your service.
Was there any community comment about this item of business? All right. The old business?
Okay, so I've sent out the revisions that were made from last month. I don't know if everybody should have got them. I do have
Yep.
copies here if you need them. And also just today is Isabel, who is here. This is, come introduce yourself.
Serendipitously, I'm here on both items tonight. I have been hired and have been working for the town for a few years now with the Future Facilities Committee, among other various committees in the community, on planning, economic development, infrastructure-related items. You are all aware by now that I have recently been contracted by the town to help with planning and land use ordinance-related revisions, some of which are as a result of state statute changes and other changes that have occurred, and then some of which are just sort of updating and modernizing based on conversations that I understand you've already been having. I had some clarifying edits that I did make today, and I'm happy to share those with you to the ordinance changes that you all have been workshopping. Nothing overly substantive, but clarifying in nature. And I also just came to introduce myself and say hello. And, I've, met a couple of you before in other work. I've been working with Pownell since 2023, but happy to help and happy to be here. I am primarily a land use planning consultant. That's the bulk of my work, but also do this grant writing stuff and all of that on the side as well. So, happy to be here for any questions that you might have, and if you would find it favorable for me to share some of the suggested edits that I have, I can do that as well, or we can follow up in a separate note. But thanks for having me.
So I would suggest if the board has any questions on what I sent out, we could go over those and then invite Isabel up to her report.
I have one, Mr. Mayor. I think the one you sent was the entire ordinance, so they're all buried.
was it?
Yeah, is that just the changes? or the one that's on the agenda is anyway. So that's fine. Thank you.
Oh, that makes sense.
So starting at the beginning, the purple writing, I'm running out of colors, by the way. The purple is something that that we had questions on the language there, and the language came from an old ordinance book. So I just kind of rewrote it a little bit, tried to make it sound the same, and put that down in purple as an alternative. And Isabel is going to have comments on that one as well.
So the purple is, so I'm sorry, just for clarity, the purple is you rewrote something that was red and you just, that's your sign that you tweaked it a little bit?
Right.
Okay,
Right.
so there was other language there.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have
Super.
Isabel come up, sorry, Sarah come up and join us if
At the
instead
same
of
time.
instead of going back and forth.
Sure.
Might as well just get their input on it at the same time as we're discussing it.
Are you just taking it sort of section by section down the list of things you all have already looked at?
Yes.
Do you want me to add my comments first, or do you?
Yeah, but I'm interested instead of us discussing the purple and red and then going back, if you want to chime in and your take on this section of it, I think that'd be helpful.
Okay, so this was one that I had some more substantive edits on. So here, what I tried to do was add, keep the same policy intent, but explicitly outline what would happen in 3 fairly common scenarios that we see with regard to non-conforming lots of record. So a typical lot that's not contiguous with any other lot in the same ownership that is also non-conforming, so doesn't meet dimensional standards. This would be allowed to be built on without a variance, but would need to follow some specific procedures outlined in the ordinance related to uses. For example, if it's a site plan review and that would require your review, that was sort of unclear from this, only because of the language that said may be built upon with the approval of the building inspector or the code enforcement officer. So that was one of the first things that I added, was just a general section at the end that says nothing in this section shall abrogate any other provisions of this or any other local ordinance. And in cases of conflict, the stricter requirement would apply, but clarifying generally that a non-conforming lot of record, which is basically means that it doesn't meet the dimensional standards as of the effective date of the ordinance, or which is made non-conforming through an amendment to the ordinance, can be built upon in any case. And I think that's sort of the policy intent that you're getting at with this language anyway, but just wanted to clarify that. And then the second one, which I will admit is slightly more controversial, but just want to flag for your knowledge, is in a situation where you have 2 non-conforming lots which are under the same ownership. Typically, these would become automatically combined to the extent necessary to allow the lots to meet dimensional requirements. So the goal is always to eliminate nonconformities. And so if I own 2 lots next to each other that are both nonconforming, the typical process is that these would become automatically combined. That's a little bit of an expansion of what you have here, but I think is also what you were trying to get at with, single lots of record. So not a policy change, but something I wanted to flag as a common situation.
What do you when would they automatically be combined? When they want to build something or just at a random time whenever the town decided to do it?
So this is kind of why it gets controversial. It would be upon adoption of this section of the ordinance because you don't have anything to that effect right
Yeah, I
now.
don't know if I'd want to do anything.
Okay.
That's aggressive, but happy to discuss it. With.
They want to build on, maybe it's a requirement.
Yeah, I think if it was triggered like by them wanting to build something, it makes sense. But then. Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think if there are circumstances of why.
I can speak to some certain instances. So this happens a lot in communities with a lot of camps along, lakes or ponds where folks purchase property, sometimes under, like the husband will buy it and then the wife will buy it, technically two separate names, but same properties for all intents and purposes, same use by the applicants. And in those situations, essentially the problem is that when you go to then sell either of those properties or both together, sometimes they get combined on the deeds, you are allowing nonconformities to continue. So that's sort of the trade-off that you get. Frankly, the other situation is if I just wanted to purchase two properties, both non-conforming that are next to each other. Currently, they would be non-conforming and I could purchase both of them as one owner and be taxed on them as if they were buildable under that first general section. And so actually, in that instance, it might be better for the property owner to have only one lot that is combined anyway. So these are kind of the common scenarios. But I can appreciate where you're coming from, that it should be triggered by development review application coming in.
Yeah, that makes more than like the idea of someone just opening up their tax bill and they're like, what happened now? I had two lots and it's one and nobody said anything. I could see that potentially being a headache for town staff to deal with. But it may make sense in like, yeah, you want to build something and you have non-conforming lots, then that's when it's basically like you can't, or that, yeah.
A lot of towns assessors will, if lots side by side are in the same ownership, they will combine them for tax purposes.
Yeah.
The deeds are still separate, didn't go through the registry of deeds, but, there's one tax bill instead of two.
Yes. And that also gives you as the property owner, more favorable tax liability in terms
Not
of property
always.
taxes. Two buildable lots down to one buildable lot.
But if you have two non-buildable lots and then you're making your
Yeah,
other lot
true.
more valuable basically by making it bigger, then you're actually paying more in taxes.
True.
So evidently there was a reason why this was struck before. Understand.
Yes, yeah. And I appreciate what you added in the purple. That matches what I added at the end, just sort of different formatting. I don't want to move on from this discussion, but I'll give you the third use case. And if you want to keep talking about this, we can come back to it. So the third use case that I added is in the case of eminent domain. I don't know how often this happens, but it's nice to have a provision when it does, because it's happened to me in a couple of towns that I worked in now, where, the state or a public utility takes something through eminent domain, and then the property owner is coming back to the town to ask for either a variance or a full zoning amendment or things like that. And so this just gets ahead of that and clarify, this would get ahead of that and clarify that in those cases, such a lot must be in separate ownership and not of continuous frontage with abutting lots, but that it is still, a non-conforming lot that is allowed to be buildable for all intents and purposes. The one note that I added here is that to qualify for this exception, you still need to be able to meet DHHS requirements for lots without public sewer and water, which is 20,000 square feet currently. So I also added that to the general standard for this section as well, because that would be important in a community like this.
Well, but if they're compensated for, like, usually eminent domain, they're being compensated for in some ways.
Yeah.
So if they were compensated in a way that it was recognizing that it made a buildable lot unbuildable, but then for us to then say, actually, you can build upon it, then potentially they're getting an additional benefit through it. I can understand if it was like, it was, I don't know. It's in some ways it seems like a no-brainer, but in other ways, I always come up with things in my head of, is it a no-brainer?
I think my intention here,
Yeah.
to get at the use case, is if there's already like a structure on it.
Oh,
So, but I'll clarify that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it's already, if it's already a built lot, I think that is different than, but then there is interesting things with state rules and ADUs and allowing more structures, and so that always now adds this additional interplay layer where you're like, okay, if your lot got smaller, is there really room for an ADU on it? So I think it'd be good to have clarity that, setback requirements or other requirements still need to be met, even if, even if it is it was a built lot to begin with, to do further building on it.
Yeah, so that's a good point, and that was one of the general standards that I sort of expanded upon as well, because I do think that's the policy intent here. So I just noted a non-conforming lot that is non-conforming with respect to lot area, street frontage, and lot width are the only instances where this applies. Everything else would require a variance, like setbacks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I guess kind of going back to I don't think we talked about this in the workshop, but so if this was created at a time when it was allowed, built upon with the approval of the code enforcement officer, so completely at your discretion, what are like the, right, because you're not meeting a lot of the dimensional standards. So what can be done there? And what could someone try to really push and force on there that code enforcement don't have anything to like really point out and say, no, you actually can't do this, but it just seems very open-ended because you're not conforming to anything, and now you just have this open pass to allow quote building.
This was my concern with the way that this was currently written as well. I thought, no offense, that it gave too much authority to the code enforcement officer and didn't explicitly clarify. I'm always thinking about how people can try to get around this. It didn't explicitly clarify that all of the other provisions of your ordinance still need to be met, with the exception of lot area, street frontage, and lot width. Those are the only things that are allowed to be, that are applicable under this section. So that was why I added this additional standard at the end of not abrogating any other provisions of this or any other ordinance. Yeah.
That's what it had before too. It's just,
Yeah.
That's the problem with this entire ordinance in general, is it just non-specific, or just ideas that are planted, but then they're not fully built out.
Yeah.
And then nowhere in here do we explicitly say you cannot create a non-conforming lot. Is that something we want to add? Because clearly it's happened in the past. But do
Well,
we want to allow, I don't think anyone on this board would allow a non-conforming
Well,
lot to be created.
No, I mean, there are this popped into my head in previous discussion of, there are reasons to create potentially non-conforming lot in that you are intentionally creating a lot not to build a house on. You may have a wood lot that you want to have an access road to, and you want to cut down trees, and your intention is never to build a house there. And so some of these unbuildable lots we have existing we're being told, oh, they were made unbuildable, but with the idea that they could put a house there in the future. But my thought is, we don't know that. Maybe they're intentionally portioned off in a way that it was not to put a house in the future, but that it was a wood lot or a
Well,
recreational
then it should be
lot,
deed restricted to be
you know? Well,
non-buildable in perpetuity, basically. Not
Yeah.
like maybe in the future you could allow it.
well, I mean, when it's, when the language says until it becomes a buildable lot, to me, you know, we've had discussion about roads and whatnot. That doesn't necessarily directly imply you can put a road and it makes a buildable lot, but that could just mean you bought another piece of land and merged it and you made it bigger and now it is a buildable lot. I don't know.
Well, then buildable under the current code. I still think like that 60-foot things, this still needs to get kind of tightened up too. Cause I don't know if you want to do this, but there's, you know, in the exhibit in the back for roads, it says you need a 60-foot right of way. Doesn't talk about frontage. So, you know, being able to put a road in with only 60 feet of frontage is kind of, has been potentially used in the past for non-conforming lots.
I think we're talking about two different.
Yeah.
We are, but that's kind of going to what Orion's saying.
Well, yeah, well, I got off on a thing. So
Well, do we want to, I mean, the idea is to eliminate non-conforming lots, generally speaking. So do we want to allow them? Nothing in here says you can't do it. I get your point.
I am so surprised that you would allow a non-conforming lot to be created, even in instances where it is just for like wood lot or something else. Typically, once an ordinance is adopted, and I see this a lot more
Yeah.
with towns that have like very new ordinances, 1990s, 2000s. There's a lot of nonconformities because there was hundreds of years of development without this. It is very rare that once you adopt an ordinance, you would allow lots to be created.
Okay.
That
No,
don't
that makes
then-
sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that you may end up with situations where, yeah, you have a divorce and the court splits lots, but then that's beyond people's control. But where, yeah, that makes sense to me too. You have existing non-conforming lots and they're way they are, and actually you're saying, trying to make it in your rules that going forward, you actually have less non-conforming lots because when they can be combined into a conforming lot, they should be.
So should we explicitly say no conforming lots shall be created?
Am I missing like a reason why? I mean, I guess your
No, I
instance
mean,
might be the only
But I
one.
mean, your explanation makes sense in that this is common practice that towns don't want to create non-conforming lots, basically. Like, and it makes sense why you wouldn't, because it just adds more headaches later.
Which we've seen.
I think that the example you're looking at is the one we're working on.
Yeah.
It's interpretation. The interpretation has always been that 60-foot right of way, you could put a road in, so you could potentially make that a buildable lot in the future. So that's what that's what the planning boards in the past have always went on. So that's why they're there. It's the 60.
But I think we don't want to start creating
They're not,
minor subdivisions where someone has 60 feet. And then suddenly now you can, wait whatever period and then start adding more roads and have another subdivision within the subdivision, right? I mean, so I think that's what we kind of want to make clear. So I mean, to have a lot, you need 300 feet of frontage as an ordinance is currently written. So I think sticking to that and not allowing these less than 300-foot non-buildable lots, non-conforming lots to be created is smart and just cleans it up and keeps it simpler.
I think it needs to be clearer in the ordinance if we want to do that going forward, though.
Yeah. Right, there's nothing that says you can't. I don't, and again, I think, this group may not approve something like that, but it doesn't mean 20, 30 years from now. So I think just as part of cleaning this up and keeping things conforming, it makes sense to put a very specific exclusion on creating non-conforming.
Tim, do you know of any, like off the top of your head, do you know if we've made any non-conforming lots in the last 15, 20 years?
Yes.
Okay. 10 years? Are they becoming less rare? Are they becoming less common?
Yeah, I think that Bill's was within 10 years when, and you're here, I'm going to use you as an example. So it's been common practice that, you know, if a developer, most of the time, the developers aren't developers that want to sell lots, they're
Yeah.
landowners that want to build a house or two. So they don't want to put the money into building a road right now.
Yeah.
But they still want to protect their interests going forward. So they leave a 60-foot strip where a road per ordinance can be built to create road frontage for more lots. Or, you know, the lots, so that's why they're marked unbuildable until all ordinances are met.
But it wasn't non-conforming, it was just non-buildable.
To buildable, right.
And by putting the road in, 300-foot road in, it would meet the requirements of the ordinance.
Right, because you gave yourself frontage in that instance. So I think to get at your question, the other piece of this that I added is that we're kind of jumping ahead, but I'll bring it up in this discussion. So you guys had the definition of frontage drafted as the portion of a lot's boundaries which abuts a road, public or private, and has a minimum depth of 40 feet. And then it was a suggestion to add, and 300 continuous feet. I don't think that, there's a couple of reasons that I don't think that that's an appropriate definition. The first is what we're dancing around, which is that you can't create a lot that doesn't have frontage, appropriate frontage. So we need to better define what frontage actually means. The second thing is, if for some reason the dimensional standards of 40 feet front setback or minimum lot depth and 300 continuous feet of road frontage is changed, it's just not best practice to have it in the definition, because then you have to remember that you have to change it in 7 different places. So what I have done is I've also come up with a different definition of frontage, which is just the continuous horizontal distance along a lot line of a parcel which directly abuts and has legal access to a public street or an approved private road measured along the property line. The implication here being that you couldn't do what you're suggesting, which is just create a right-of-way. It actually has to be either a public street or an approved private road. And I'm being sort of explicit about that because that would obviously have some broader implications if this has already been a pattern of things that have been happening. Yeah, okay.
You got locked up there waiting for a road. So I think that's the only thing I want to make sure that we protect is the history of the town.
Mhm.
While at the same time, we don't want a bunch of roads going, so I think we need to just make sure we're.
But-
Yeah.
Yeah, but those existing ones, right, they would be judged by previous
Right.
versions of this.
They would
But
be
this-
non-conforming.
Yeah, and this would be only for
Yes.
future lots, so.
For moving forward and still allowing those.
When-
Yeah.
So what you said makes sense to me. Is there like an asterisk or something that says or is it helpful in the definition part that says, see this section for more detail on what frontage requirements actually are? So you have the definition of frontage, but then it actually reverts you to that section that has what are the requirements.
I'm not fully opposed to doing that and just referencing back to that table. I just think we have to be consistent so that
Yeah.
then we also have things like front yard depth and all of these other things where we reference it in other places. It starts to get pretty cluttered pretty quickly. So I think it's just I think we leave the definition piece pretty open with an acknowledgement that sort of the theory behind zoning and land use ordinances is that you should be aware that you need to check other sections.
Yeah, I believe we talked about that in the workshop too, because we're going to use frontage and not mean 300 feet. So I think we need to understand, and it sounds like we might have been using the word frontage wrong. I think there almost should not be numbers in the definitions if they're referring to,
Yeah, the continuous piece gets picked up in these tables. Right?
yeah.
Right,
Yeah. Which is
exactly.
kind of keeping-
Exactly. Yeah. And I did put the word continuous horizontal distance in the definition of frontage as well, just to really reiterate that, but yes. And just, I apologize, I didn't get a chance to actually look at this until today, so I will follow up with you guys with the drafted changes that I had. This this and one other section is really the substantive changes that I've made. I think for the most part, everything else was sort of adding clarification that I hope will be acceptable to you, but I'll follow up so that you can see this and the other section when we get to it. And so we can include it in your packet for the next conversation.
Does anyone know our timeline in terms of just seeing this before we get to the required
March
public meeting?
19th.
March 19th. Okay. We'll make sure we read this.
So that's the next meeting or?
Because I think we have to do a next meeting and then very quickly we have public hearings before we go to town meetings. So I think they're just, we get really tight there in March and April.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just to continue moving down your list of changes. So one of the definition changes was the one we just talked about with regard to frontage. And
Next one was in net developable area. It's add in number 3, area of 50 feet or less between boundaries. And that's in sections of the ordinance and, you know, what does that mean? We didn't really have, we knew what that meant. So this is what I think it means, because you can't count that as net developable area because you can't build it. Can't do anything in it because your setbacks squish it out.
The one comment that I just want to have, and I'm not opposed to this from a policy perspective, but I had flagged in net residential acreage. So if, for example, I have a lot that is sort of a flag lot or one of those where it may have less than 50 feet, that starts to matter in terms of calculating net residential acreage, so the number of dwelling units you can get. I'm not opposed to this from a policy perspective. I think that it makes sense for the reasons that you're saying, but just a flag that that might limit some property owner interests.
And I think this is in here because in the past, we've tried to get rid of flag lots,
Yeah.
not develop.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah,
have them.
it makes sense to not count that, because I mean, when we're calculating lot density for other things, it's like we're looking at actual buildable land, not unbuildable land. So to say that, yeah.
Another, I hate to skip away from this again, another area that the 50-foot comes into play that, you know, I have a question on is that if a lot, so say a lot goes around another piece of property and it's not 50 feet, does that mean that the two properties are separated then as far as developable area? I mean, can you count the developable area on the other side of that 50 feet or not?
What do you mean?
So if there's an example of it on a property, so you have a property that kept 10 feet on the back line and they sold that property in the middle, but they own around it.
Yeah.
But they only own 10 feet or 40 feet.
Mm.
So it's less than 50 feet. That's not countable as net developable area, but can you count that as access to the other back and forth? So if there was 300 feet of frontage on one side, could you use that on the other side of that lot that's split off in the middle?
Oh, is it continuous, basically, is what you're saying for frontage?
Did you run a driveway through it or what do you?
Just, I mean, so let me draw out an example. So there is a lot in town that's went through single lot several years ago. And they put in a private road. Okay, and then they kept less than 300 feet on that private road for the front lot and developed the back lot. All right. Something like this. So they kept 10 feet right there, thinking that thinking that this property back here is gonna be able to come around here and use the frontage on the main road or the back.
Yeah, yeah.
So does that 50 feet of net developable area, does that mean you cannot use that as a connector anymore?
Can they actually put a road back there?
No,
A driveway back
no, they're
there?
using, they could come off from this driveway because they don't have 300 feet.
They do on their arm.
They do on this road,
Oh.
but they don't on the private.
Yeah.
How'd they even get the 10 feet? Minimum lot width is 50 feet, so that never should have happened.
It was made.
Yeah.
It's interesting
I
question.
think that would be my response as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, somebody made it. When it was made, I don't know if it was in the ordinance this way. It probably was, and it got missed, is my thought.
Even if that was 50 though, would we allow it? Like, even if it was 50 feet, it's still a reach.
Well, if your minimum lot width is 50 feet, that's what you allow.
There's like a non-flag lot, because you
Yeah.
have just enough and then it becomes, yeah.
So just.
Yeah, yeah.
on-
People are creative.
You gotta think of every scenario. I'm just trying to.
I mean, it's not coming up right now, but
Yeah.
in the future, when they want to build that on that front lot, or the lot here and use this for frontage, it's gonna come up.
I mean, if it was in the ordinance that they shouldn't really done that in the first place, then it's sorry,
They've created their own.
you created your own nightmare.
Okay.
But yeah,
Sorry to say.
interesting case.
I think
That item there, free area, 50 feet, area is two dimensional. Does that mean width or something? That is square. Am I missing something?
I thought we changed that actually, didn't we just talk about span?
Distance, yeah.
Yeah.
Distance.
We missed it.
Yeah,
What word did we use?
I think it was like distance or span
Or width.
or width, so yeah, we were talking about. I don't know if it was here, but we definitely mentioned that.
So what is the word we're looking for?
Well, maybe width, just because it's consistent with like minimum lot width.
Where?
Good catch.
I want to keep going down this rabbit hole, but like this 60-foot thing, I mean, you don't have your 50 feet next to the road, so it doesn't like, that's another thing that just like limits that's non-conforming stuff. Right, so you can't even count that road frontage if it's less than 50 feet wide because you've got 20-foot road, you've got 20 and 20 or 40 at most.
Well, they kept 200 feet. So it's 200 feet. And then they went around the backside of the property.
Well, I was even talking about that in general. Like if you just have 60 feet of frontage or slightly, if you're only at 60 feet and you need 50 feet of width and you have a 20-foot road, you've only got 40 feet, so it doesn't even work to get you in. So.
That number three can still end up being a little bit confusing. For example, if we have to have a minimum lot of 90,000 square feet, 300 by 300. If you can't count a distance of 50 feet or less between the boundaries, then does that mean you have to have a 400 by 400?
So if you have a 400 by 400 foot lot, then you don't have this problem. It's only when you create
How would you-
flag lots that have less than 50 feet.
But what if you only had a 300 by 300? You have a problem.
No, because you don't have an area that's less than 50 feet.
unless it's a funky shaped lot.
Right.
Okay, right.
Right.
It wasn't for business.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
CEOs.
So it's the same thing on the next one. And then 504 zoning district, we put in continuous.
I was fine with that.
Good. And then, on Two structure and accessory uses that are over 35 feet in height. We had some discussion about that last time. And then on to 3 that talks about height some more. Any comments on that?
I had one, this is again, like very minor clarification, but I just added to the end. Because when you talk about special exceptions, usually you're talking about a use. And I'm not opposed to this change from a policy perspective. I think it makes sense that there's a recognition that structures that are over 35 feet in height might have exceptional impacts, making them something that should be reviewed under special exception. But because that's where my mind goes, and I think other folks that are familiar with zoning, that's where their mind would go, that special exception typically connotes use. I put structures that are over 35 feet in height, comma, regardless of use, anytime that was changed. And I think that was what you were trying to get at with that, but just a clarification.
We tend to overuse site plan review.
That's a broader conversation for another day, I would say.
So what's the or piece? Because we did have this conversation, right? I mean, around farm buildings and stuff. So is that applying to all 3 zoning districts? Or how does this fit into each of the 3?
Yes, I think if the change would be, I mean, you could change it differently in the rural districts if you want to a higher height.
No, I think you're bringing up a good point. So then when you scroll down to the purple, this is where you had talked about the foregoing height limitations shall not apply to farm buildings not used for human habitation nor telecommunications towers. So I think that I just have to clarify. That would be the place that I would suggest clarifying, with the exception of farm buildings and.
Across all 3 zoning districts.
Right.
Is that
Yeah,
the intent?
I think that was your intent, because that's how it is in each of the districts. Correct me.
So it would go under each one, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are farm buildings allowed in every district?
Yeah.
And
Is that defined
is that fine?
or defined?
What?
Yeah.
It's farm buildings defined.
Village district. Height restrictions. Currently, it's the same language in the village district under height restrictions on page 39E.
Oh, but this.
So, and again, like I said in the last meeting, 35 is a number that I picked because that seemed to be a number that a lot of residential uses are, is 35 feet, flagpoles, buildings, 2.5-story buildings at 35 feet. So if you want to build a 3-story building, it's going to be a special exception or whatever we want.
But you can build a 2.5 with an ADU on top of it, right?
Right.
So what we're saying is a farm building isn't subject to 35 feet and the cap is 100 feet? Is that, I mean,
Let me read it again.
the last purple paragraph is saying no structure shall exceed 100 feet, but that's approved pursuant to the subsection, which I guess a farm building would be an exception to, but that wouldn't so that apply.
So how I would read this is that, yes, either farm buildings or telecommunications towers could theoretically be 100 feet.
Yeah.
So,
Farm building is not defined, could be a gigantic greenhouse. Or are we saying, well, that was one of the other things, did that make it in here where we're saying the limitation on the size? Like we're talking like 20,000 square feet is not a farm building?
So I think
It's not, well, we didn't say, there was a thing about normal farm uses.
Right.
And then we never defined normal farm uses. And so the question was, do we want to like have something that clarifies that, yeah, if you have structures that exceed over a certain size, that's not a normal farm use and they should have a site plan review, basically. Was. And the 20,000 square feet number came up because that's potentially more industrial use than a normal farm use.
The other thing that we talked about with, when we were working on Estabrooks is defining agriculture a little better too.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's where Ryan's going. We were talking last time about putting that exclusion in agriculture, like if you're talking about. I don't know, it could be building usage or it could be overall footprint, but. I think that's just some clarification because. The Estabrooks example, you could basically have 100-foot greenhouses there that are covering multiple acres. So I think when we were talking, we were saying more like a normal barn, it could go up to 50, 60 feet with a cupola or something, but you're talking 50,000 square foot greenhouse, you might not want 100 feet.
Or you could leave farm buildings right out of it and have it go to site plan review. But how are you gonna limit, if you don't have, you're still limited to 100 feet.
Yeah.
They can design something to 200 or 199 feet or 99 feet, excuse me. So, and then how would you deny that? You don't have.
Yeah, no, I think it's good to have that and we want it, but I think we need to. Agriculture, that definition is so open-ended and that's a specific exclusion from site plan review, which is why Estabrooks, we couldn't review the farm.
Or there was
buildings.
one interpretation we couldn't, and then somebody else said, no, you could have.
I think you're right. I think to me that the best solution is better defining farm agriculture and then also adding a definition for farm building and making that explicit that those are exempt.
I think that's my problem is we use the word farm building, but that's not in the definition. So, yeah. Because I also worry about someone saying something else is farm building and
Yeah.
it could be,
In the absence of a definition, the sort of zoning theory is that you go with the dictionary definition. And I think to your
That's
point, you
super
can go
broad.
with any there's a bunch of different definitions for what a farm building could be. So I think we need to clarify that for our purposes.
And that would be like under a certain square footage per structure, right? The intent is like, we're thinking was barns, there's a lot of, but not massive industrial structures.
So somewhere in here, for business use, 5,000 square feet, I think is the maximum. So you could say farm buildings will not exceed 5,000 square feet or 50 feet in height, whatever you want to pick.
5,000's not that big.
I think I would want to do some comparison of like similar communities and how they regulate it. And so I made a note
Yeah.
about the
Yeah.
definitions and can come
Yeah,
back.
Get a business use be 5,000 square feet and farm use be bigger number to that, but not an infinite number, basically.
Yeah.
And it's not saying you can't, it's just saying at some point you are triggering a site plan review. Not saying you can't build a bigger building, it's just saying we recognize even if it's for farm use, that certain structures will have an impact if it's above a certain size.
To clarify, you're going to work on a
I'm happy to.
That's right. We pay you the big bucks.
I mean, if you want to keep it simpler, right, maybe just say buildings used for agriculture, and then the definition of agriculture, which you already have, is, any buildings used for agriculture, normal agriculture shall not exceed 20,000 square feet or.
above the word normal.
Well, that's the thing, normal's in here somewhere else, right?
Yeah,
It
well,
doesn't make any sense, yeah.
we're defining, yeah, I guess, we're limiting normal agriculture by the 20,000 or whatever square feet.
Just something,
we
yeah, buildings
decide.
for agriculture can't exceed individually 20,000 square feet or something.
Well, I don't even know individually, because you could say like, here's 20 greenhouses that are each individual, like, in some ways it should be like the total amount of your structures. You could have a number for that as well, because you could have, tons of small.
Well, I mean,
or
you
small.
get into just what's permanent versus agricultural farm building, right? I mean,
Yeah.
So I've got like one small improvement that's 30 by 100, so that's 3,000 square feet. And if someone were really farming out there, they'd want at least 10 of those.
Yeah.
Now you're at 30,000 square feet.
Well, permanent versus temporary is definitely an important distinction.
Okay, can we move on from that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a few red ones here are continuous. Adding the word in again, and then we go to 605 single lot. It referenced an old ordinance number, section 8. So I just corrected it to section 610, which is public roads. Manufactured housing. So that's where I suggested that we add in some criteria for manufactured housing, such as one thing I will not back down on is it should be on a concrete slab.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, people could just put them on cinder blocks and walk away.
These design standards are fairly typical of other communities. I don't have any specific concerns. In fact, some of the other communities I'm working with go much, much further than this. So this is fine. I will say I, as a formatting change, added subsection K and added these as explicit design standards rather than where they were located, but truly just a formatting change.
With the discussion we had last time touched upon at least my uncomfortability with, putting aesthetic choices into, your ordinances versus safety or, I think there's reasonable restrictions to put in around safety and things like that, but to just be like, because you have, and this idea of like, yeah, you have stuff that was made in the 1970s that isn't well construction, then you have manufactured homes that may not look exactly like everybody's homes now, but are built really well. And so to, not allow them, I think we didn't want to go overboard with language in this.
I think this gives, we know what the intent is with this. So I think that if you have a modern design mobile home that comes out with a flat roof, we can say, well, the intent is really to not have the old style roof that was unsupported and yada, yada, yada.
You want to go a little further on the foundation, like that it's got to be, like 4 feet deep, so a frost level. I mean, like, not just, you could just pour a permanent foundation that's 6 inches or 12 inches deep, then it's going to crack and break the structure.
So I think adding the word engineered in there, engineered reinforced, kind of, you are allowed to build a house these days on an engineered slab. So
Doesn't need frost walls around it?
it does not need frost walls. It's called a haunch, where it just gets a little thicker at the sides. So it's got to be, the haunch needs to be at least a foot deep. So, but on a mobile home, you don't need that because the bearing weight is in the middle. It's not on the sides. So it really doesn't, as long as it's reinforced, it's fine. So you could say frost protected as well if you wanted to.
Yeah, I didn't know that nuance, but just as long as we're covering that, I think we're good.
And then beyond that, what did we have? Public roads, we took out. So I purpled preliminary because we were stumbling on that in the last meeting. And then took out the word major in the conservation subdivision. When was that? 6?
Tim, can I stop you? Can we go back to your purple and red at where you're talking about the preliminary minor and major conservation subdivision plan? There's that sentence underneath there, the proposed new road shall be shown by meets and bounds. Do we use that language consistently throughout the ordinance? I remember stumbling over another term that was older and we had moved on from it. I just want to make sure we're consistent, and maybe this is something we look at in the next year. Okay. Okay, so leave it for now, but maybe
Yeah.
think about it as a consistency issue.
That's what I would recommend. I will say I have not done a full audit for like consistency of language or anything
Okay.
like that. That's kind of the next step. I just wanted to, I knew you guys were already working on this.
Get those changes. Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. Thanks for flagging
I
it.
think you'll find a lot of old and new. As this was redone over the years, nothing stayed consistent.
I had one note on this one, very minor. If you scroll up a little bit, you can see that there must have been a checklist at one point and it was transposed here. I think, we should just take that out.
Oh, the yes, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like it belongs there.
One time, we're right by that.
Mhm.
You can see.
Never noticed that.
Yeah.
Comes up as a zero notch.
We crossed out Hammerhead, but do we want to leave Hammerhead and say Hammerhead or turnaround?
In the appendices that we direct people to for road standards, it doesn't have a hammerhead, it has a turnaround. And that's for a long time, the planning board, the old planning board, years past, went rounds on this as well and changed it to a turnaround from a hammerhead.
What if somebody has a Hammerhead now that's an old one and they want to count their road frontage, like?
I'm just guessing at why they
Yeah.
stumbled on it. So if you're, I think the road frontage maybe was added and counted around. So if you have a hammerhead, you have more road frontage than just a turnaround.
Yeah.
That's one guess. The other thing is that if you have a hammerhead, it's not real functional for turning around in.
Yeah.
It ends up, part of it ends up, being a driveway or something like that. So
Yeah.
there's really no place for the plow trucks to turn around.
Yeah.
And it's harder to plow. I can tell you that, so.
On floodplain management, you had a note, and I don't know if it was changed yet, but you had just had a note, that it's referencing 1980 and it needs to reference the most current map. Well, you had a question, should it reference the most current? It does need to. This is kind of semantics because once FEMA adopts new maps, in order to still get flood insurance, you have to comply with the new maps. So like our ordinance ultimately functionally is referencing the new maps, which were adopted June 2024. But in terms of like a formatting change, just adding that date in there, I think is good.
Or is there a way to just leave it out?
Some towns do like, or as most recently amended, which is also appropriate. Okay.
Recommended, or is it a recommendation? Is that the right word?
I would say as most recently adopted by
Adopted.
FEMA, yeah.
Okay, so 615 accessory dwelling units, again, the state is changing our law, but we don't have to comply on it until 2027, but I'm putting this in here because
Yeah.
I don't want to be the police on this. For
No.
you. So if we got to change it, let's just change it.
Let's just update it.
I had a flag on this one, and it's a question more than anything, because I don't really know. Have you had a conversation with the town's attorney on this one? Because I know that Pownell has this unique definition of subdivision. Typically, this wouldn't automatically trigger subdivision. So I was uncomfortable with that reference at first, but I know you guys also have this unique definition. So I think this language, if anything, and this is reviewed by the town's attorney, this language is the one that I'm most questioning more than anything.
So which one are you questioning?
The
G?
new, yes,
Two?
the G, yep. So all dwelling units and accessory structures permitted on a single lot shall remain under single ownership unless and until the lot is lawfully subdivided or is otherwise divided in accordance with applicable statute. I guess my question is, does that include like condominium statute? Or,
I think that's what we're trying to avoid is condominiums.
okay, because technically, under the typical
Condo-wise, a BDU, and
would be owned separately, and then you work out how you're gonna pay utilities. But I know that Pownell has this unique definition of subdivision that I am frankly have never seen before and I'm not super comfortable with. So I think this one just a flag to send it to the attorney for review. Yeah.
Well, were you proposing A or B, right? It's either pick the red or pick the purple.
Right.
So they would just pick the red. We just go with the red one and ignore the purple one?
Or you pick. I mean, which one do you like better? And I think the last time we stumbled on the language of that, so I put an alternative in there.
Which language are you more comfortable with?
I'm more comfortable with purple. I still am just sort of questioning, like, I think we want to understand the full implications.
So we can get, all of this will go to, for legal review.
Yeah.
Anyways, but
So you're saying that purple one would allow condos?
Right, as currently drafted, so I would interpret, and if this is not your intent, we should clarify, but I would interpret or otherwise divided in accordance with applicable statute as allowing condos under the condominium statute.
Is there a state condominium statute versus the town having a condominium statute?
Yeah, yep, there's some explicit language around what that looks like and land in common and all of that.
I think what we were talking about in the workshop was more the red. All to stay in single ownership and avoid having.
yeah, we want to avoid that.
Yeah, so that's why to me, red makes more sense and conveys that more. Right? If there's a condo statute, because then yeah, someone can just go to that and say, all right, well, I don't need to subdivide it. I'm just gonna
Well,
divide the ownership on
does the
this
red-
lot.
does the language red? I don't know if the language in red solves the condo issue
I agree.
either.
I agree. And the other piece of this is the most recent state legislation clarifies, sort of re-clarifies again that you're not allowed to sort of do what you're proposing here. And so, for lack of a better term, so like you can't make it required to be single ownership. You can't make it required to be, you can only rent to a family member. All of those limitations that municipalities used to do are no longer allowable for ADUs. So that was also why I sort of flagged this.
So it's a good chance we just leave them both out.
Yeah, if the state has gotten rid of the single ownership requirement, then I guess we don't need it unless there's some loophole that the state hasn't totally gotten rid of the single ownership requirement. But if they have, then yeah, we don't need this, I guess.
I know the assessor in Newry and all the condos they have up there, it is a nightmare for assessing.
I was gonna say, yeah, how do you start doing?
Yeah.
Their system probably isn't set up for.
Yeah. So anyway, a flag. I'm going to be upfront with you. I don't fully know how to solve it with the policy implications you're trying to get at, but
Sounds like we can't.
yeah, it may be that you can. Yeah.
So I'll go over that with Ben, see if he can suggest other language that would make it work.
State's just coming down, just trying to mandate and dictate
Yeah.
if it's the community or not.
So going on to 800, striking, they had some purple in there. I think that's changes that we had made the last meeting. Strike residential and structures. And then we're definitely striking sand and gravel pits as exempt site plan review.
Yeah.
I'm waiting.
if that is the policy direction that you want to take, I'm sure that there's been
Could
discussion that I
they-
didn't know,
could
so.
They'll say standard gravel pits are normal agriculture.
I don't think so. That's more an industry, I think, than agriculture.
So, sorry, just to clarify, you are striking it from site plan review because you
Yeah.
want the CEO to review sand and
No,
gravel
we're-
pits?
We're striking from being exempted. from site plan.
Exempt.
Oh,
So
okay,
just
exempted
get
from this ordinance.
Site plan.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense to me.
No, we want tons of sand and gravel. pits.
I was very
Put 'em in-
confused.
Well, I thought on this too, like, we definitely talked about striking residential because the implications of that. But I thought we were gonna keep structures because that word's just hanging, right? It's and accessory and uses. That's how it's always been drafted, so it,
Right, so we take off the first and. Sorry, I didn't strike that.
no, but
And use.
Residential structures, comma,
Residential structures.
accessory and uses.
it should be accessory structures and accessory uses.
How did that make sense before, the way it was written?
It was just hanging, it was accessory, so it implied accessory uses only, but I think it should be structures and uses.
So we're keeping structures, that makes more sense.
Yeah, I think you cut and residential, and then just it's accessory structures and uses.
Okay. Good with that? And 807 is just bringing the site distance up to state specs right now.
Yep.
901. There was some misnumber in there, so that's creating or just changing the number and sequence. There was there was 13 and 14 were combined and it should have been separate. 902. I took a guess, that's the right title and chapter that we want in that.
I had flagged that one. I looked it up. So this is an old standard that has since been repealed.
Okay.
The current one is subchapter 3, subsection 4401 to 4408. I think you had both.
Yes, I wrote that.
Yeah.
in there.
Yes, but that would be the
So it's not,
relevant.
so it's 30-A, chapter 187, subchapter 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you're trying to get at the definition of and the associated exemptions of a subdivision, I believe.
Then we had variant 909, variances and waivers. Again, reference different sections in the ordinance from before.
904.
904.
Oh, it's out of order.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry. Yep, sorry. 904, we do there.
750 feet.
So.
So I had some concerns with this one. So this might be allowable, but you would need to tie this kind of spacing to like a policy or recommendation of the comprehensive plan around, for example, access management or retaining rural road function or things like that. I think that this, of all of the proposed changes here, is the one that's going to be most subject to appeal. The first applicant that you get here that says that you're not letting them build a new private road because there's already one next to them, I think that one's going to be challenged. And so I'm not opposed to doing this as a policy approach. But the important thing there is that it needs to be rationally related to, actually, it should be explicitly related because this is going to be a little bit controversial, I anticipate, to your comp plan. And I couldn't necessarily find anything in there around like roadways and access management. Obviously, there's a lot of conversation about rural character, but
That's what.
Yeah.
That's why we did it. conservation subdivision, because everything has been about 300 feet of frontage and 600 feet of roads going in, which puts a driveway every 600 feet,
Yeah,
even though you have hundreds of acres behind it.
right.
That's why you have the conservations. I think we're just trying to keep it a little bit cleaner here too. So you don't have a driveway, you know, or a road really that's even wider, like roads, just trying to keep that rural preserved. So maybe we add at the end to preserve rural character as outlined in the comprehensive plan, something like that.
Yeah, I think you would need to be much more explicit, and I would, this one is just one that, like, from my experience, I would caution without like a more explicit recommendation of the comp plan. I am not saying that it can't be done. I'm also not even saying that I'm not like fully opposed to this from a policy perspective, because I think it makes sense with all of the things I know about Pownell. Of all of the changes though, I think this one's the one that's sort of most concerning to me. And I would be very careful about how you word it and making sure it's tied to an explicit goal of your comp plan, since your comp plan really provides the legal rationale and the backing for any zoning amendments.
So maybe this one needs more research. To make sure we can fit it in there and reference back to the comp plan.
Rural character, I mean, everything's vague, but it's.
Yeah.
That was the premise of this rural character. I mean, you don't have all these either open fields transected by multiple roads or nice stretches of woods and trees, right? Now it drives a couple 100 feet. So that was the intent.
I mean,
I see the complexity here. I also fear that we actually do want to do this time. Like from March and April. You know what I mean? Like I understand the complexity. I'm also just a little, I just don't want to get in a situation where we need this. And, you know, I don't want to delay it because it's complex. I think it is.
I mean, the
The
creation of a
comprehensive plan.
minor subdivision will make it like minor subdivision means that there's one road basically, as opposed to a bunch of roads. And so this is really controlling if they put that road right next to an existing road versus separate. But if they do put it right next to an existing road, then there's going to be an even longer space before there's another road, because they can only put in one road and they're supposed to have that 600 feet of road frontage. So in some ways, does it matter if their entrance is that much closer to someone else's road, given that there's still going to be a huge space between roads anyway? I guess, you know what I'm saying?
Are you saying they only get one road? Like they could put in two roads, couldn't they? And just put two houses on each road.
Oh, yeah, minor versus.
You could do that in a field, no problem. And I think that's what we're trying to avoid
Yeah,
is two roads going in and there's two houses there.
yeah, yeah.
Did we attach this same thing to major? Yes, yes. Conservation, sorry.
Well, the major one makes sense, right? Because, yeah, you're supposed to. The idea is to have not tons of roads.
Yeah.
And like I said, frankly, this is probably the policy approach that I would have recommended if I had done your comp plan, you know what I mean? Like it would have been explicit and like, this is what we should adopt. I'm just cautioning that, and admittedly probably being overly cautious, that I would be concerned about this one more than anything being challenged.
I guess, I mean, we can put it in there and try to put in language referencing it to something. And then knowing that, I guess we could be challenged and maybe we'll have to back off, or maybe we won't, we can fight it, but just it's what we said we want. So I would put it in there and see if we can come up with some language that provides more clarity or justification.
I think, yeah, I mean, just tying it back,
Yeah.
you suggested tying it back and
Yeah.
minimally using rural character. There's probably. I think it talks about like preserving views and things like that, right? View sheds.
Yeah. I think there may be things that can get us pretty close. So again, another like flag for the attorney, and maybe they can suggest some specific language.
And if anybody else can come up with the language going back to the comprehensive plan for this, then.
Drop it into Gemini and just let it pull up all the references.
The one last thing that I had just some notes on, yeah, we are. So, on the establishment of a mobile home park overlay, I think the rationale and what you're trying to do from a policy perspective makes sense, like sort of narrow the areas where it might be allowable. When you do an overlay district, though, it needs to be like an officially adopted zoning district. So what I did was I added it to the list of districts in section 501. And then basically you have to establish a specific intent for a zoning district and the location. And so while an overlay functionally operates as like a portion of an overall district, in this case, the rural district, it does require its own establishment and set of performance standards rather than just being treated as a sub-district as you had kind of put at first. So it doesn't replace the base district, it just modifies it when certain conditions are applied, in this case, when a mobile home park is proposed. So this is like honestly in function of formatting change. I didn't really change anything that you didn't already have, and then just referenced back to your existing mobile home park standards. But essentially added another zoning district that is the mobile home park overlay. And this will need to be added as an overlay on your official zoning map as well.
We want to make sure we do this right.
Yeah, this was like maybe overly nitpicky, but just
No,
wanted to make sure it was clear.
We want to do it right, for sure.
Could I take us back one topic? I just want to make sure I'm clear. Because we do reference the 750 feet in the conservation subdivision, do you have the same concern? Okay, so whatever language gets replicated there. Okay.
Yeah.
I volunteer to shoot you something that you can work with, because tabula rasa stinks. So I'll at least get you something that you can work with and show the attorney.
Thank you. So that takes care of all the reviews that I put for. Bill is working on something for mobile home parks.
Yeah, from the last.
I'm sorry, I didn't send that out to everybody. I just got it today, Bill.
Oh, that's on the, it is on the panel website.
I did look
Okay.
at it,
Marcia did get it out.
or, yeah.
Yeah, I get that out to you, but I played. This is from the last planning board meeting, last to look at, requirements for mobile home parks when it comes to septic systems and, water.
I think it's here.
So this is under, it's part of our mobile home park ordinance, section, above that, about 5 utilities. And then you'll see D is septic system requirements. We've been, as you might have heard, we've had some challenges with some developers questioning, where can I put my leach field? What do I need, where do I need to put the pumping system? What kind of well do I need? Do I need a well at all? Can I use dug wells? Can I use, what kind of use like that? So this kind of really kind of clarifies it. That, for example, see, this is the, okay, basically, right off the bat, it says, we aren't the gods. We're all approved by state statutes, and these are the statutes. For example, some servers, wastewater disposal system, those are all like that. Have to go by 2.1.
Want to come up to the mic? So
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. The
The goal is to prevent the town from being part of a lawsuit due to misunderstanding. Having 241 lets the applicant know that the requirement is and lets us know what our boundaries are. If there are any conflicts, the CEO can contact the Maine Department of Health and Human Services. And when Tim and I were working on this, we were learning like, okay, who governs these rules? So this clarifies it for the applicant and for there's nothing abnormal here. It just clarifies it where the applicant will have to look and where we can look. And the second one, replacement and a reserve disposal area. Now, according to 241, we can require, but it usually isn't, a reserve area even for a single family home. It usually isn't. On the HHE 200, you can actually require that. Usually it isn't. It's usually meant for multiple, multiple buildings, mobile home parks where you have to have or if there's a particular instance where the leach field, for example, would not have any, you wouldn't be able to build a leach field beside the current leach field. For example, what we've seen someone has a right of way and then has a leach field on somebody else's property, that automatically sets up, this is going to be a problem. So this will actually give you, 241 will give you the authority to, actually does give you the authority, or the state has the authority to say, you have to have a secondary leach field. But that's, again, Tim would call the Maine Subsurface Water Disposal Rule folks to say, am I reading this correctly? And also of course, the applicant can look at it too. Now this the next III, the 24-hour power interruption performance standard. This section establishes a performance-based resilience standard focused on preventing public health impacts. Like 241 has a lot to do with public health, but we, the town, can actually enforce some other types of public health requirements, but it has to be reasonable. For example, we can't say you have to have a standby generator for your septic pump. What we can say is something potentially more reasonable, is that you have to have at least a 24-hour, if the power goes out, you have to be able, your leach field and your system has to be able to survive for 24 hours. Meaning in this case, you have to have a bigger septic tank. So it's all going to go downhill, sit in the septic tank, and then the now, if that doesn't happen, we want to section 4, standby power connectivity. Now, again, if it ever in court is going to say, oh, so you want them to have a big diesel generator last week out there and all the fuel supply, they can say, well, it's unreasonable. Well, they will, let's say, have a utility connection, so you have just like your standby care house, you can have a standby generator for the septic pump, but you have to get it there within 12 hours.
So you can't mandate an on-demand generator, but you can mandate
A connection.
a connection.
But it's all about being reasonable in the eyes of the judge. You could mandate a generator and a fuel. But the judge might say, first, the applicant might challenge it. The judge might say, it's unreasonable, go back to square one. Well, in this case, there's a good chance that the applicant would say, all right, I'll do it. Which is, again, you made the goal. You've got standby connection, and all three generator within 12 hours. And you'd also have, as part of, which we want to think about as well, is the declarations of park owner responsibilities that ensures legally filed with the deed that the park owner is responsible, or whoever buys the park is responsible to make sure that they're responsible for the septic system and water system. Different. Okay, emergency response during extended outage. Okay, this is get 12 hours. Alternative, this section gives them not a little bit about it, but it says the planning board may approve alternative compliance with equal or greater protection is demonstrated through competent engineering evidence. You might have an applicant say, well, I don't want to do that. Why? Because it's not necessary. Well, really not necessary. You mean and have a professional engineer saying, well, why it's not necessary, what's the alternative thought? But it's flexible. And then if they do sue, they're being too tight, it's all about obviously everything we do now has to back in the judge and the court. Where it's all about not getting sick, not having to call oil. And then the next section, emergency preparedness. That's to make sure that when you do see the red light out, it says the septic pump isn't working, who do you call? Usually, it requires our owner to give a list of who to call, you know, when there's power outage, when septic outages. Things can, if you know, things can go bad pretty quick when the septic pump stops. You learn to have your septic tank clog out. Keep filling up, it's holding your whole house. And the last section, enforcement, just use the statutes that we use right now, home rule. This isn't, anything, that is unordinary, it just shows that we can enforce it, since, again, in case an applicant says, oh, you can't enforce that. Kind of ward off any losses. And the whole goal was to have a reliable sewer system. We need a septic pump that we pass a pump standard pump. What you ever did there, kind of had to do logs. So, sure, Isabel, then people get it. This does not stand by septic. Now, the standby power, not standby water, water. Again,
I have a question about the septic.
yes.
So I mean, the idea of multiple people using a shared septic system could potentially not be exclusive to a mobile home park. And so would we potentially look at having these septic requirements be applicable to other types of development if they're using a shared septic? And then that way it's not explicitly, you know, a requirement that's targeting a mobile home park. It's targeting anybody, you know, people who have a system that's dealing with multiple inputs of a certain size.
In the conservation subdivision, you mentioned that if lots are a certain size, below a certain size, then it may require an engineered septic system.
Yeah.
So that would be the other place that this should apply.
Yeah.
Water systems is standard. Level across the facility. So it's best to do that in terms of section. Just reference by vote or.
You put you both.
On standard for applicable and septic.
Yeah.
State like the standards.
Questions on septic? You know, the water requirements, very simple, but you want a, you know, whether it's a 3-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom or a 3-unit, mobile park or larger, you want to allow water. Then again, it starts off with people who are required, now in this case, there are two statutes, so there's the manufactured housing for this, chapter 201, that has a certain amount of jurisdiction over mobile home parks. Well, there's also 231, which is the main, it's administered by the main center for disease control, when it comes to drinking water. Minimum design capacity for 150 gallons per minute per day required, or 201, that's all cat and stone. If they have any questions, why do I have to go 150 gallons per day for a while? You can reference, so they can see section 201.
For water or building, right? Because now we're talking about putting multiple structures. So like a lot could have. 3. Definitely 2.
Well, this one specifically usually a mobile home lot using one structure. So the one if you have 10 structures, that.
Okay, the mobile home doesn't need to do.
What's that?
The mobile home doesn't need to.
Don't possibly some future.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, that's where you have to go. There are other questions that become up, and that's what we're gonna have to.
Well, if we take this out of the mobile home, it's more of a design standard for any kind of shared system. I mean, I think it should be per building. Is that what?
Or
Per X number of bedrooms?
per dwelling, yeah.
Period. Okay. I would think, and this is just me throwing out liquid, but I would think that you would want to do at least a number of bedrooms. And that's not.
That's what the septic design is based on, is the number of bedrooms. So the water could correspond with that somehow. Yeah. And I don't know the numbers that you would use to do that, but as per.
It's just 201, like when you're referencing previous ones, per bedroom or per dwelling. Right, that's where we've had some confusion. There's the, as an LPI structure, there's the, but there's the main manufacturer housing board, which has jurisdiction over some of the regulations from, mobile home parks. And then there's also, chapter 231 by the Center for Control, has yet another set of parks. But the manufactured housing board for mobile home parks still says 150 gallons per day per lot, meaning per mobile home structure. Let's give you one or two up to 2 bedrooms. Yes. So you're 75 gallons per day per bedroom or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
150 gallons, but that's their number. I think
Mobile home can be more than 2 bedrooms, can it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, this gives us, this sets the requirement, and then if there's any question about the requirements, we'll contact them. Well, I think now it's just that, but ideally, we can find some of that instead of per bedroom, because we're gonna have the same issue. Just in general, your house subdivision, most of the ADUs and multiple houses per lot, this would be a restriction.
I think you need to be, we also need to be careful about changing the language here, because you've got this right from
201. And really, in a lot of ways, we can't be prescriptive, we can be performance-based, so we can reference prescriptive requirements from the state, but we can't prescribe them. So if we want to say 300 gallons per day, per minute, per day per mile, we would go up.
Yeah.
It does that, so we want mobile home per mile. I don't know that it's probably say fill out another sort of one.
Yeah, I mean, the bedroom thing doesn't make sense to me because like if someone has a big house with lots of bedrooms and it's a single family home dwelling, and so somebody uses all the water. It's someone in your own family in your own home that did that to you versus if you're sharing like, multiple dwelling units with different families, then that's the problem of people.
I think that's the thing you gotta remember. This is for a mobile home park. It's not really for a development. It's for a mobile home park. And mobile home park density is a lot greater than what you would normally allow in a development. So
I think that I thought septic for any shared system.
Right, I think you're gonna have to pull it out of here and put it somewhere else in there, because I do, like I said, the state and the what do they call it, the mobile home industry or division has a lot of, you can't deviate from a lot of things that they have in there. You have to be careful of it. And and a lot of this stuff is reference. They're gonna have to do it anyways. This is just that they're gonna require it, and we're gonna. So we gotta make sure it matches.
Demonstration of the probability, because we had some requirements of where you had to do some types of testing, and then I came up with one version where said you had to test for radon, radon in the water or something like that. But we can't actually set those requirements. Those are set by the main CDC or go on a vote. So we can't even set it. We can't. There's no sense putting them in here. We can say because those standards may change. Then you say 4 parts per million today, but maybe they find out all. We'll start requiring test testing. So we can't even specify. We just say refer them to chapter 231. Now, the first structure protection standard, which is what we really kind of thinking about a few months ago. And then if the water goes out, they're gonna have to back up. This is where under due to, pump health, just like having a septic pump, the town can require, both of them to have outside in the water. And that is, you'll see in the backup power systems. The town finds the rural, electrical, use that's 12 hours or 4 single or strong, that's stuff. Agreed, so, probably we want a, power source plan. Okay, system shall be capable of maintaining a portable, potable water supply during temporary interruption power for a minimum of 24 hours. Meaning you have to have some type of, that would actually require a state budget.
And so this language, Bill, is straight out of the state mobile home statutes?
Yes, but there's a big but, because this is assuming it's a public water supply, public water supply.
So that's-
like 3 or more units, fewer mobile homes, that's fine.
So public water supply is 20. I think. Yeah, so this really wouldn't apply to a smaller.
I know it doesn't apply to the small, more than those 3 to 4, so that's the.
Yeah, and can I just, I don't know if you saw it when you were doing this, but going back to 4 on the infrastructure protection standard, I see it. It just, does that say that there has to be a separate facility or a separate building? And that building has to be accessible at all times and it's not in a dwelling?
And that's where it comes out performance-based versus
Yeah.
restrictive.
Yeah, so I'm wondering,
Don't believe, and this is where there's no,
Yeah.
to all of us, to see, can we just require a separate building
yeah,
rather than having one that's securely housed or protected from freezing and weather, so that way if someone says, well, it's important, and you say, we gave you the performance-based standards, as long as it doesn't freeze and keeps working, we're okay.
yeah.
Granted, we had somebody that wanted to put underneath the wall. So that's what.
Oh, good reason.
Anything would oppose this one.
Yeah. Anyway, that's, this draft, if you will, obviously. This is all review. That's in trouble.
Yes. Okay. I think we can send it to review. I'm not sure that we'll get to all of it on this year's warrant articles. But if there's something, when we were going through the mobile home park review, if there is something that really you think needs to be changed in that ordinance or addressed in that ordinance, I think that it might be a good idea to do it. But again, the state guidelines on mobile home parks are pretty strict on themselves. So you can't ask for more than what they say you can ask for.
This is good. That one's in city statute is kind of. We don't know that one, so put it in this. Sure, it's there, so it's.
Yeah.
I can see Isabel. Isabel or Isabel? Isabel, I can see Isabella, Charles. Well, yeah, those kind of, show kind of less is more.
Something that references, that I'm always on for, references and customer service.
Okay.
All right. Any public comment?
No. No, there's only me, yeah. Okay, this is regarding the Stetson subdivision. Regarding our Bowling Range route, we haven't been on the road over the next couple of days. Go down the Bowling Range road, start at Route 9, go the whole way down, all the way to Freeport to start, come back. Take your newspaper card, and you'll see exactly what the road is. There's another base, so there's a lot of, crossing. Heavy roads been closed for heavy roads are now. Now, as it evolves over the next 2 months, then it turns left. So again, don't take your favorite car. Again, there's a little bit, you'll see bubbling back just about 2 or 3 miles forever. You get mud bubbling out through the soil. That's because it's gravel with no base. So you've got, what we need to do is dig it up, to go down almost 2 feet. And then put in a good base. Then you put, geotextile fabric down so the mud can't bubble up, or you put another foot of gravel. So over the next couple months, go down there, and then we'll see what's all about. These, the development was ever permitted in that location, the farming top 3 goes into the back. And the other part of that, when we talk about regarding the low density, the lot density calculations for offices. So again, if you're going to pretend that there are no houses on frontage from around, we need to apply that logic to other costs and developments as well. For that, if the Heritage want to build a development on crossing, they could pretend to combine 2 lots together in frontage. If the Wyman's want to build a conservation subdivision, they could pretend that they don't have a big development along there. If the Hives want to build a conservation subdivision, pretend they don't have a cemetery. The whole idea of pretending there are no houses in order to get higher lot density, it's not like it does, whatever, that ever came up for the creation of conservation.
Budget update?
Mechanically. I know that we're gonna add more money in, Isabel. Beyond that, I really don't have anything to say.
CEO update?
So I sent out, I asked the questions that you wanted me to ask on. And I have it myself. Oh, there's the questions that you wanted asked on the Stetson Farm subdivision on the road index. So I think that all went out to you. So can the board request a safety study and the evaluation report? Yes. And then, and this was all from, North Star. We're going to say North Star. It's all from North Star. The answer is from them. So basically, yes. So Bill's comments on, the road study and stuff like that, it can be, we can ask for them and we should ask for them. It's usually during the next, not the preliminary, but when we're going over, the next one, after we accept their initial plan, then we start going over. When we start really digging into it, that's when we start requesting these things.
Yeah. So someone can't actually assess what they're looking at, traffic or kind of conclusions in theory.
Right.
And then this has
and then you go from there. Then you start saying, okay, who's going to pay for that? You can ask them to pay for the studies, but then getting them to pay for the infrastructural improvements, I'm not sure if that's written into our ordinance, whether we do that or not. It's not in our impact fees, so we can't do it through impact. So. I'm looking.
Honestly, on this one specifically, I would have to look at your ordinance, because it really depends on what it says in terms of jurisdiction improvements. Some towns have a section in their ordinance sense when they're reviewing their site plans or subdivisions, so if the applicant is directly responsible. So I was happy with that section. I think
Should we add in some language if there's not there?
it helps make sense to have that as language in there.
Yeah.
And we can be sort of nimble about how we add that, you know, I don't know that we would want to make the applicant pay for it in every single instance when there's not a clear, tangible, you know, their project isn't the reason that a team can go and get, I don't know. So we have to be a little bit nimble, but I think it is totally appropriate to have that as standard.
So the next step for me is you want me to look through the ordinance or ask Isabel or North Star. Okay, going forward, can we make them pay for these improvements if they're needed?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that the law is that you can't make them necessarily pay for everything, but you know, it could be some cost sharing. They pay for a portion of it based upon what their impact on the road would be. And so I think, yeah, looking at what other towns have for language could be helpful.
But right now, I'm pretty sure that we don't have that language in our ordinance. But this review has already started, so we can't use.
Yeah,
other
yeah.
Language on the same file as review. All right, what else do we have? I did do some work on the Harrison Road. I'm sorry, I still, every once in a while, the printer will print upside down on me. So I can't. But I do want to. Yes. So this is something that I put together. Kind of like North Star gives you a memo. So this is the way I see the process happening on the, it's not the Harrison, it's the revised, Roscoe Bigelow project from 1998. So this, you know, my explanation of how we handle it, and then going through it in red, which is my recommendations on the answers to these. So I don't think we're here to discuss this tonight, but I just wanted to present it. And, you know, if it seems okay to you, I also want to share it with the Heritage.
What's the not applicable?
So not applicable for G, they're not adding any more lots. So the only thing they're doing here is completing the previous subdivision. So, yes.
Tim, is the applicant's intent then to build a single house?
That was what they initially came to me for, yes.
Okay.
Their own house. Doesn't mean that in the future, they're gonna come back for more, or maybe when they come back the next time, they're gonna be asking. This is what they were asking for in my.
Understood, thank you.
This is all process, we have to. 67 and a half million votes on that, so we just put it right there. I guess that's still struggling with why. Dan's and John. I want you to go through that step.
So,
Or what, that's why it would be not buildable, so you don't meet the front requirements, so it says not buildable.
right.
If you go through that, and put in those lots, which. Was allowed.
So I think, go back to what I said earlier tonight, is that, you know, the person that split this up before wasn't a developer. It was a landowner, homeowner. They wanted to sell a lot off. Maybe they needed money, whatever. Maybe they wanted to give it to a child, whatever they wanted to do. So they did that, and they wanted to keep options open for the future, but they didn't want to spend the money on it right now. So they kept kept the 67 feet, knowing that they could put a road in and create another lot later. They don't want to do it right now because they don't want to spend the money.
Well, physically putting a road, you could have drawn on the plan. Right, that would have not been that built.
Then it would have been not built, right? But
But yes.
it would cost money to have a road drawn up at that time. So I'm not defending them.
No,
I'm just saying that maybe that's why they did
They
it.
already went through the full cycle. So. And not to draw on the road, just to be probably there, there's a set. Because in theory, you're just saying this is a portion. That's Alaska, now we label it not buildable. But the conclusion of the time could have been that it's not buildable because you don't have frontage for a road. I guess it's the flip side of it.
So the other thing I'm
Just a point. I know the family involved and Jennifer getting would be Rocky's daughter. That's how the original plan came up. And maybe that made that how it got that's a
there's a lot of things about this division that the initial division was because of divorce, which should have never gone through subdivision, but it did. So it started the subdivision ball rolling way back, 4 years before the next one. So, I can't tell you why the road wasn't drawn in there, but I can say that the intention was to do it later. And somewhere in so under 504, or actually 610. Sorry, I didn't number the pages either. You can see number 4, I underlined, right of way. So a lot of places in the ordinance, or a few places in the ordinance that are right away, when you word search it, you find it. And you read that, I think the 60-foot right of way kind of ties to that. So you're supposed to let, in this case, the applicant shall submit a list of all butters within 550 feet of the proposed right of way. So the right of way means the area where the road is gonna go.
Right, this is a requirement.
Not the proposed development, but the proposed right of way. So I was just trying to point out that right of way, the meaning of right of way means where the road lies. And, I did run all of this by North Star too. They did agree with all of this.
Honestly, in this situation, we are dealing with the realities of the ordinance as it was at the time of the subdivision and at the time the applicant brought this forward. I don't see another option. I think you've actually laid it out pretty clearly. That was my understanding at the end of our last meeting. That was my understanding. And then there was a whole series of alternative things. So I didn't know where the applicant was landing, but I think this is the correct response to the initial thing that the applicant brought to your office. And I have a different opinion in terms of the intent, because I don't think we can surmise on what the intent was or was not, especially when we have past practice in the town that we put in right of ways to hold the spot for the road, so we can put a house in and end up money for a road. I think kind of just how the town's done it. We can definitely change that moving forward, but I don't think we can put our own opinions on it moving backwards.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with going forward with the CEO and North Star's recommendation. It is an interesting situation, and to me, it still makes more sense if they want to put it a home in to ask for a variance and just put in a driveway. But if this is the way they're pursuing it, then and this is what seems to match under the rules, so
I
let's
think
do it.
that if you did that, you have a line at the door.
Yeah.
You allowed a house to be built 67 feet of frontage. You would have a line at the door of people looking for variances. I think you have to do it through ordinance.
Yeah.
So I think to correct this going forward with what I heard, you really have a problem with, the board really has a problem with creating a road for one house. I think you need to look at the backlot ordinance and redo that. So you can allow backlots on less than what it does right now. Right now, the backlot ordinance says you have to have a right of way of 60 feet over the front. And there's all sorts of other things. I think you really want to get away from putting in roads in for one house. You need to look at the backlot ordinance and try to restructure that to avoid this.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, this and just not allow non-conforming lot, if you have to.
yeah, I mean, the thing that I have the concern with is not necessarily people who have existing non-conforming lots, but that people going forward can have the idea in their head that I can just create a bunch of non-conforming lots and then ask to put in a road later, which totally defeats the purposes of all these other requirements we have in the ordinances.
So I think you as a planning board going forward need to figure out what that language needs to be in the ordinance to avoid that.
Well, I think it's covered it earlier. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a obscure place you can't see it, but we'll all know that. It's
But going back, I think you're going to have to allow them where they were created before for that purpose. I don't think we're going to fix that tonight.
No, we're not.
Come on, we got 20 minutes. Yeah, I think it be interested to look at, yeah, for the people who already have existing non-conforming lots, is there a more rational way to do it? Makes sense to look at that in the future.
I think you need to look at the backlog ordinance and try to restructure that to allow something to. If somebody wants to put, two lots in their back, then, maybe you're gonna have to create a road or 3 lots, whatever you decide with the back lot, but for one house, it makes sense to redo the back lot and
Yeah, yeah,
a driveway with
Yeah.
it. So,
That thought requires a road, but that can be a drive.
a driveway.
Yeah. That.
But the back lot ordinance is a lot more restrictive. You wouldn't be able to do that on this lot because it has its own frontage. The back lot has no frontage. It has a right of way for the front lot. And that was written, designed on purpose by the board back then, because that was what they didn't want to allow back lots. Yeah.
and you don't want a back lot, and then you end up with a back subdivision, basically, which is worse than a back lot. Uh, Yeah,
They maybe put a road in.
yeah,
60 foot of front, maybe put a road in.
yeah, it did,
Instead of the other three of them, so,
yeah,
road,
it-
and then- Rather than building, putting $10,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody.
no, yeah, it doesn't make
Doesn't make-
sense.
That's my struggle with that interpretation. Why would you ever say, oh, it was this in the past? And that's not the right way, it's just for the, not for the back door. Let me get. That has enough fun. Here we go, it is very people building houses.
They're like, yeah,
Trees in there.
yeah. All right,
Okay. So
okay, communications. We received comments on Stetson project on 2/1/26, North Star response to questions on traffic studies on February 2nd, facilities committee request for input on February 4th, request for input to town newsletter, deadline February 19th. Did we respond to that? Hopefully. Important dates, March 9th, deadline for items submitted to select board for warrant article approval. March 29th, draft warrant articles presented to select board, early April written warrant articles, April 13th and 27th, public hearing. Any further discussion?
I'm sorry, does that mean you have to put language by March 9th, or is there a little wiggle room?
I'm gonna have to check with Becky.
Okay.
She told me today.
Oh, okay, there's a lot of nines here, yeah. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I saw that and I'm like, what? So our next board meeting would be March 18th. And we have a potentially Stetson project on next month's agenda.
I think they want to be on this one.
Okay. And we gotta finalize, approve these ordinance update languages. Okay,
And possibly the Harrisons.
yeah. Okay,
So we're not gonna have a lot of time for ordinance work, so
Mhm.
I think we rely on Isabel to
Yeah.
give us some
Yeah.
clarifications, a lot of corrections on what we have, and go with it.
yeah. All right. If there's no further discussion, I motion that we adjourn the meeting. All those in favor? Have a good evening.
Well,